Hi everyone, today we're going to have a lecture about safety in childcare facilities. This is going to be about a 15-minute one, just and sort of an overview on your reading and an overview on the topic of safety in facilities. All right, there we go. So our first consideration is the space that you're going to have your childcare center in. You want to consider where you locate a childcare center. So if you have a place that is very high traffic, like next to a freeway, next to a really busy street, there's a lot of noise and a lot of pollution, and it also might mean safety risks for children if there's a lot of cars and traffic around. And then in industrial areas, also something that you might want to avoid, thinking about toxic materials that might be present or also other types of noise. And another space that you want to consider is the challenges that can come with older buildings that might have plumbing or electrical concerns. So you want to choose a center that has a quiet-ish neighborhood around it, that minimizes noise and pollution, and that is, if it's an older building, that has been brought up to code in terms of plumbing and electrical types of concerns. So in the space itself, let me move myself somewhere else here. In the space itself, you want to think about how much room you have and how you design that space. And for children of any age, you want to make sure that you have about 50 square feet per child. Now that's more than what your licensor is going to say, but that is what the NAUIC recommends. That allows for better abilities for children to have good, desirable behaviors. When kids are confined in smaller spaces, that's when we start seeing problem behaviors start to surface. Also, you want to make sure that your space doesn't have a lot of blind corners where you can't see a kid. You want to be able to have a visual line of sight no matter where you are in the room, that you can see all areas where all the children are playing. And keep in mind, we're not going to go into a whole environments analysis like you will when you take environments class, but do keep in mind that when you have large open areas that don't have a lot of furniture breaking up the space, that's really conducive to large motor activities. So that's for your large motor play, and that's when kids are going to run. And if you want them to run and jump, then great, keep that big open area. But if that's not what you're going for in that particular area of the classroom, then you might want to create a smaller space using shelving or furniture strategically to create smaller activities that facilitate small motor activities. What should you do about the windows and the doors? You want to make sure that there are windows at children's eye level, but that they are also made of safety glass. So that's glass that cannot be shattered. Kids should be able to look out windows. It's very important for them to see the outdoors. It's very important for them to see the weather and what's going on outside and have that connection to the daytime and the rhythms of the day. Especially here in the Pacific Northwest, where a lot of kids are probably going to be dropped off when it's dark outside, they're going to want to see when the sun comes up and what the sky is like. So make sure that they have access to being able to look out a window, but it's not a window that they could shatter if they took a wooden toy and smashed against it. All windows and doors should have finger pinch protection, so that might mean safety features such as the little guards or slow closing cupboards. And all windows should open so that there is accessibility to fresh air in the classroom. And there should be, of course, safety measures on how much they open and when they should open to make sure that you're not causing a risk of children falling out of a window. We also want to have some considerations on the types of surfaces that we include in our centers. So make sure that our surfaces are washable, not very porous surface. If you're using wood furniture, make sure that it is not an unfinished wood. Make sure that the furniture should be something that you can clean easily. And on your furniture, if you have soft sofas or chairs, that it's covered in a slip cover so that you can take it off, throw it in the laundry. What about in the outdoor area? So if you're bringing children out, you should be bringing children outside every single day, regardless of the weather. That's best practice for children. They need a little bit more space. Remember, wide open areas are conducive to children's running and jumping, all that great stuff they need to do to get their large muscles going. So outside, kids should have about 75 square feet per child. So you'd have to do the measurement, see how many kids do you have in the space, and then calculate how many square feet do you need. You have to do a little bit of math to do this. You also need to consider children with physical disabilities. Do they have a wheelchair or a walker? Do they need more room? Do they need special accommodations on your outdoor play area? You might consider bringing in an expert that does a safety inspection and checks beyond just your licensor, that does a safety inspection for playground equipment in your outdoor play area. Let's talk air quality. So I think air quality is an interesting thing to think about in a child care center. You want to make sure that in the summer it's kept comfortably cool and in the winter it's kept comfortably warm. And I put down on your slide some guidelines that are from NAYC on what sorts of temperatures in Fahrenheit you want to keep it at, and how you should keep low but adequate humidity. So that might mean if it's a dry space, like in the winter, if there's a lot of hot blowing heaters, you might need a humidifier to keep the air humid. You want to make sure that there is access to fresh airflow, so you should be able to open windows and let fresh air in. However, you should not have drafty windows that have cracks in them that are allowing in drafty cold air. And you're also not allowed or recommended to have heaters that could burn children, so make sure that you're checking your space for that. I've included a little infographic here that I found off the internet that I think was kind of fun. That's just sort of a little basic checklist that's on a lot of the same types of ideas that you'll find on these slides in an infographic. So thinking about on this slide, the room temperature and the air quality and the ventilation. And don't forget, we talked about this in illness as well, that having adequate ventilation can reduce germs in the space and make for healthier children. So spend as much time outside possible as you can, and when you're not outside, let in some fresh air now and again so that kids have access to that. Now, along with that same line of thinking, windows, natural light, this is really best for kids. I've included a couple of photos that I think are great examples of natural lighting concepts that children are benefiting from. So like this smaller picture, this picture that's on the left has floor-to-ceiling windows of unshattered glass, and they also have some sort of skylight ones up above that let in natural light. The other lamps that you use or overhead lighting should really just be a supplement. It should be when it's dark outside in the mornings and in the evenings. They function better when there's natural lighting. Also consider the safety of your light fixtures. You're probably not going to want to install a tall, what do you call that, stand up sort of a pole lamp that can easily be knocked over by a child. Another safety consideration that's for children's best interest is your noise level. You want to make sure that loud noises are regulated, and one good rule of thumb is that you're able to speak in a normal conversation with another person in the classroom. The NAYC book has some sort of decibel recommendations. You don't need to measure decibels or bring in any special instruments to measure decibels, but just that's a good sort of rule of thumb. This doesn't mean that you should chastise children if they're shouting or screaming. Sometimes that's developmentally appropriate, especially for toddlers when they're trying out the sound of their voice. Now is the time for us to support them and figure out what's going on. Are they using a loud voice because they're excited? Are they using a loud voice because they're aggravated? Do they feel overwhelmed? So work with the child individually and think, okay, what is causing them to use a loud voice? Are they rambunctious and ready to go outside? Take them outside and let them run around and yell outside. What you don't want to do is say, hey, it's too loud in here, everybody needs to be quiet. That's not an effective strategy, and that's not the way we want to manage noise. We want to really instead figure out what children are thinking and what's going on with them, and how we can keep noises regulated. That also means if you're going to play music, don't be cranking the recorded music up really loud. That can be really overwhelming for children. So we want to make sure that it is really that you can talk in a normal voice, the same type of voice I'm using right now, I should be able to use in a classroom. That's the type of noise level that you want to keep it at for kids. You know, that's not always the easiest thing to do. Okay, so electricity and plumbing. Let's talk about safety in terms of outlets. You want to use a safety mechanism outlet and not a cover, and I'll show you something about that on the next slide. The GFCI outlets are very important these days. Consider replacing outlets to include those because they reduce risk of shock. Children shouldn't have any access to cords. They shouldn't be able to bite or chew on any cords that they're plugged in. They can also be a strangling hazard. And avoid extension cords because that can be a fire hazard. In terms of plumbing,
Making sure that the water temperature is between 60 and no hotter than 120 degrees. Even close to that is probably a little too hot. You want to make sure that there are hand washing sinks for children and adults, so low ones and high ones. And those should be near all places where toileting or diapering is going to happen. And then also your NAOIC book recommends fresh drinking water in the form of drinking fountains. They also mention disposable cups and a water source. I would actually recommend against that. We don't want to teach children that we should just have cups that we use once and throw away in the garbage. That's not a great lesson that we're teaching kids. So I recommend instead having children bring a reusable bottle or having some sort of reusable covered cup that children can have that's assigned to them so that they can go and get a sip of their own drinking water throughout the day. In fact, I'm going to do it right now. Refreshing. So here's that slide about outlets. This is just an infographic that I pulled from the internet. It shows this first sort of old-fashioned one that was used, these outlet plug sort of cover things. They can be great if you are personally traveling to your mother-in-law's house and she's not baby-proofed. But in childcare centers, we know not to use these at all anymore. They can cause a choking hazard. Kids can get them out very easily. They can break. You might not remember to put it back in, and then we have an outlet that's not covered. So what is recommended nowadays are these spring-loaded sliding covers where you have to kind of slide the front portion over to be able to plug something in. Or best yet, a full-on cover that is a child-proof cover that you need a little key or a little spacer to kind of pop open. These can be actually you can put one of these covers on top of one of the sliding outlet covers for extra maximum protection. All right, and last but not least, I'm going to take a little sip of water again. Thinking about fire safety, carbon monoxide safety, and radon gas. You should always have multiple either wired in or battery powered carbon monoxide and smoke detectors in several areas of your center, except for in the kitchen. You should have one near the kitchen, but probably not one in the kitchen. Have them near any laundry areas and definitely near children's sleeping areas. You should also have 2 fire extinguishers to be present in your center, and that is in case one fails. And I've heard before that the best fire extinguisher to have is the kind that can extinguish both an electrical and a grease fire. But I think the best type of fire extinguisher to have is one that you know how to use. So don't buy one that's so complicated that when an emergency arises, you're reading instructions and figuring out. You should buy one that is simple enough that you can look at it, understand the instructions, and maybe rehearse a little bit without actually pulling the pin, but rehearse a little bit so that you know what to do. But that simplicity of use is the most important thing with a fire extinguisher, that you know it's effective and it's approved, but also that it's one that you can use in an emergency. And then also radon gas. Radon gas is a naturally occurring gas in the earth, and it's important to have that inspection as well in the child care center. Just want to show you one website here that is our Pierce County here. Our Pierce County website that talks about fire inspections. So you can call the fire inspector and they will come and inspect your center, and you can schedule right online, and they can inspect your center for any hazards, and you can just fill in all your information there. They can inspect for hazards and tell you about your fire smoke detectors and your fire extinguishers and what's safe and what's not, and give you kind of a walkthrough. And that is also a great way to help develop your safety plan, your fire escape safety plan. So that is all I'm going to give you guys today. I hope this is helpful. I hope this gives you a little bit of an introduction to some of the structural safety things that you want to think about when designing a space for children. And I hope that you have a lovely rest of your day.